Good morning, everyone, or afternoon or evening, wherever you are on this planet. We're here on Open Water Monday with two very special guests. I'll kick it over to Ned in Cork, Ireland.
My name is Ned Denison. I'm going to be helping with the interview today. I'm a accomplished marathon swimmer with more than 50 epic swims, and I'm also currently the chairman of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Kate, will you please give a longer introduction, please?
Hello, I'm Kate Steels. I'm the chair of the International Ice Swimming Association for Great Britain. I'm also the secretary for the global board, and I'm a very keen ice swimmer and also enjoy marathon swims in the summer.
Okay, you recently, or somewhat recently, did an ice swim in Norway. Tell us a little bit about that.
Norway was a few years ago. I was lucky enough to be part of an expedition with Go Kennedy, and we went up 70 degrees north up to Mikkelbeck Brig, and it was just stunningly beautiful, and the sea was just crystal clear. If it hadn't been for the snow on the beaches and the mountains, you could have mistaken for the colour of water that you were out in the Caribbean. So yeah, it was amazing. It was around 2 degrees, and that's where I did my polar ice mile.
And was that your most difficult ice swimming experience, or have there been more difficult ones?
No, there's a particular one that stands out as extremely hard. In fact, it's the hardest swim of my life. And that was when I did my ice zero out in China, in Shangyueshang, at 0 degrees it was a competition pool set up with frozen ice from a large river, or lake, should I say, sorry. 40 lengths, 40 and a bit, very long lengths. Yes, it was my longest, and at the end, it really tested me, and the after drop was like none I've experienced before, and I don't want to go back in a hurry there.
So what was the air temperature?
I think the air temperature was about -14, but with wind chill it was -22 from memory, -24. But I had a lot of support there. Rory was there with me, but there was a lot of team from Russia, and Alexander Brylin, or Sasha, was there, who I've known for quite a few years, and I certainly wouldn't have attempted that without knowing that I had a really good recovery team. There was a sauna, improvised with hot towels, the usual Russian method of recovery, which personally I find the easiest and safest for me. So yeah, I had great support there, even though the conditions were extreme.
And was this a tank cut out of the ice, or was it in a swimming pool?
No, it was cut out of the ice.
And was there wood coming down to prevent you from going under the ice, or did you rely on your own brain power not to go under the ice?
It was cut out of the ice, but it's a good pool size. It's just a matter of trying to count the lengths. Obviously, people were shouting to me. There were some language issues with some Chinese people. Thought I was going to keep going once I'd finished to do even more. So I was a bit confused when I got out. But yes, but the other thing was that we landed in Harbin, and they'd lost all our luggage completely. We got it back the day we flew home. So I was in China in those really severe conditions, and we'd had to make a trip to Decathlon to get some emergency gear, and not most of the Chinese are quite small, so that was a challenge in itself, and we're having to borrow coats and stuff to wrap up before we actually got in the water, so it was challenging.
And this presumably on your quest for the ice sevens, this would have been your Asian ice mile. What were the other ones?
So I've done 3 ice miles in England, so that's my European one. Norway is my polar. Asian and ice zero was China. Lake Simcoe in Canada is North America. I went to New Zealand and did that last year. And I don't know, what's the other one I've done?
Africa.
Africa, so went to High Atlas Mountains, thank you. Yes, went there a few years ago, and now I've just got South America left to do.
And scheduled for when?
Hopefully, if COVID-19 allows it, I should be going in July this year.
Okay, so you're one of the couples around the world who both done incredible marathons and both heavily involved in ice swimming. Tell us a little bit about how that works with Rory, who's a superstar in both of those sports as well. I presume you're much more supportive of him than he is of you. and I presume you're still faster than him.
Yeah. We're both very supportive of each other. Obviously, Rory swims like a rocket, and he loves racing you, Ned, as well. Especially down the River Lee, where I think bridges have been known to sort of come into contact. But anyway, yes, we're both very supportive of each other. Rory's much faster, but he doesn't like to stay in the ice quite as long as I do. So maybe his love of the true cold water isn't quite as great as mine. But no, we both support each other, and I think make a really strong team.
And how do you combine these two sports with working and living in Britain?
Well, at the moment, there's no swimming, but normally we both swim at Winchester City Penguin Swimming Club. So we train at 6 in the morning or 5:30 in the morning, 4 times a week before work. I've set up a local winter swimming club at Andart Lake in the winter. We got some grant funding for a sauna, so at the weekends I'm always down there. And in the summer, I take off and go to local beaches, which are about 25 minutes drive away. Find me in there or in the River Hamble, which is tidal, wherever I can. And if I've got a big swim, like now, I would be normally hoping to get about 3 hours in the water at the moment. But as I say, we're not able to swim at the moment, so a lot of training to catch up on.
And in the last couple of years, has the swimming eaten up every bit of your holiday allocation?
Pretty much, yeah.
And then some?
Yeah.
And you talked about your Chinese swim and the rewarming. Imagine that all the audience has no idea what the rewarming is like. Tell us what it's all about. Tell us what happens when you get done swimming and when you reappear sometime later.
So when you get out after a particularly tough ice swim, whether that's tough because of the length or the temperature of the water, you've got to be really careful of the after drop. So actually your body will get colder once you've got out the water. So to go somewhere warm, and I would only push myself with a support team and if they've got the facilities. So in this example, and like they do in Russia, you'd go somewhere warm and you'd put your hands and feet in what feels the water is actually cold water, but it feels warm, and they might stay there for 5 to 10 minutes, and that's to stop the pain in your fingers getting too bad and the capillaries opening up too early, because you don't want cold blood from your extremities rushing to your heart, because that's going to cause you big problems. And at the same time, people will put really hot towels sort of under your groin, around your neck, around your kidneys to help warm up your vital organs quickly. And then once you start to sort of feel a bit more conversational, I know Ram always says what somebody's eyes look like, but once you come to feel a bit more chatty and you're feeling all right, and I'm saying, can I get in the sauna now? They'll say, yes, you can go into the sauna. And then, you might start shivering an awful lot, but then you're okay, you're starting to recover, you're coming round, and then you go past that feeling of cold, and then you get nice and warm and toasty in the sauna, come out and get changed. Yeah.
So occasionally we hear people that have some temporary nerve loss in their fingers or toes. Have you experienced the same?
No, not personally. Rory did. The first time we went up to Mance for the first World Championships in 2015, he lost the feeling in his fingertips for a few months. But I always say that if you're in an ice pool when it's really cold, I always try and turn touching with alternate hands. So that if you've got, depending how you can turn and the height of the pool edge by the board is from the water's edge, and that's always inconsistent and varies from pool to pool. But sometimes if the boards are like over a foot high from where the water surface is, I find that quite tricky to turn on. It's not as easy, so you just have to adapt. But certainly try and use alternative hands to turn when it's that cold. So
instead of touching a vertical wall, you're actually trying to grab something on your turn.
Or the surface, the ice,
okay.
Red carpet, break the ice away and have a little bit of red carpet where you can put your hand on. Yeah.
Okay. And as I follow you and Rory on Facebook, I see you often have these adventures where you seem to take off and hike up the side of some mountain in the snow, go for a little bit of a dip and pitch a tent. Tell us a little bit about this unusual lifestyle.
I love having a little bit of an adventure. Rory gets quite worried. I said, I've got a plan, or shall we do this and that? And he has a little bit, uh-oh, what's coming next? But yes, so before we've got a really big event or competition, we like to go up to North Wales, stay with some good friends of ours, and we go out all day trekking up the mountains in Snowdon to try and find the coldest tarn, which is, you know, you can get into it, it's not covered in ice. And yeah, trying to swim 2-3 times a day in there and seeking it as cold as we can. Yeah, other times I like to take my tent and do a bit of wild camping or campsites. Rory's not quite so fond of the wild camping, but he's getting there.
And how does the training for the ice swimming compare with the training you did before the English Channel?
So with the ice swimming, it's more about acclimatization. And I found that really difficult going to New Zealand last summer because it was the height of our summer. So it's little and often. I say little because you can't stay in the water that long, but I always try and do at least 1 kilometre. But listening to my body, obviously if things didn't feel right, I was really suffering at the time, I'd cut that short. I also have an ice bath. I don't particularly like it, but I'm a firm believer that that does help, certainly if it's going to be somewhere very cold. Or like last summer when I went to New Zealand, here it was like 20, 23 degrees. Even at the edge of the Solent, the water was approaching 20, and there was me going out and having to acclimatise within a week and do an ice mile. So yeah, and the training for the channel, it's about putting multiple hours in and training in the sea every weekend and building that distance, so that I was quite like a military planner in making sure that I stuck to a timetable and I got the hours in, got the distance in.
And the mental challenge of each different, similar? How do you approach the two of them as a mental challenge?
They're different, but they're both mentally important. So for the ice, you've got to psychologically tell yourself that you're capable of doing it, but also have the ability that if something went wrong or you started to feel things weren't right in the water, you're starting to suffer, you might be taking on a bit of water, your stroke's gone to pot, you might be feeling a bit dizzy or anything like that, you've got to get out straight away. Or both times, if anybody you trust is watching you, tells you to get out, you've got to have that, whatever you might think, you get out and have that total and utter respect, and everyone around you has to believe that. The other thing mentally, I think, is in both cases, you've got to believe and have that confidence you can do it, and sort of have in the back of your head to be able to park that you've done the training and you've put in the hours. Some people might be okay, might be able to risk it, might get away with it. But for me, it's certainly having that confidence that I've done everything I possibly can, that I've trained hard, I've prepared myself as well I can be, and I've just got to go out there and do my best and be confident and not let other people down too, if it's a charity swim particularly.
So some marathoners will say that in 3/4 of the way through a 15K swim, they might not be feeling well, they might not be overly motivated, and they kind of go back to what I call big swim memory, and they go, come on now, you've done 35K, this is only 15, come on now, you've got too much ego on the line, just pull it out. Do you do something similar in the ice where you go, okay, it's not China, it's not ice zero, it's only another 22 laps or something? Do you use the same kind of mental tricks?
Sort of. Well, I try and cut it down into proportions of the swim too, and I sort of find about halfway through I always seem to slow a little bit, and then sort of the hardest bit I would say is probably from 800 to 1200 meters. By the time I've got to 1400, I know I can do the next 250 or whatever. I usually try and do 1650 meters, so there's no doubt that it's at least a mile. And then you sort of got the end in sight. You can taste victory coming on, and so a lot of things go through your mind. But it is about trying to appreciate the beauty of where I've been swimming, because each venue has been unique. Each has got its own. They're each beautiful in their own ways, and I just try and tell myself how lucky I am to be there. How it is that most people couldn't do this crazy sport that I love. So make the most of it. I've got a lot of support back home. And just keep going, push myself a bit harder and do it.
And tell us about the journey that the sport of ice swimming has had in the last 5 years when it comes to safety and inclusion. Um, what are the big changes that you folks have made in Britain and across the world to open it up, regulate it, keep it safe, make it safer?
So as part of ISA, we review our rules regularly, we tighten and we make sure they're as safe as you possibly can do. Obviously there's always risk to sport, but the fact that we have to have every 6 months a medical record, a medical check and an ECG is really important. I think that when it comes to competition and competing in the 1,000, the 500 meters and under, it's about making sure that, we're really have a good setup, that we've got good safety, you've got medics, you've got ambulances, to make sure that you're not doing tumble turns, you're not allowed to dive in. So it's making sure, certainly when I'm an event director for GB, that you're actually adhering to all those rules, that you do a thorough briefing to the swimmers, that you have suitable changing areas that are heated for them, or designated recovery area. So you've got to learn from each other. The other thing is I've been involved as a guinea pig with Portsmouth University for a lot of their scientific experiments at the Extreme Sports Lab with Dr. Heather Massey. And this year at the GB Champs, we've started a medical study and medical survey with Bournemouth University and Dr. Ruth Williamson, which will help provide evidence as we want to promote the sport and hopefully get it accepted as into the Winter Olympic Games.
And what kind of evidence are you collecting?
So they've been taking core temperature, body temperatures before the swim, after the swim, dexterity, how mobile your fingers are between sort of, before you get out and then after you get out. They're taking some body fat and height measurements as well, that sort of information.
The reason I smile is we were talking the other day about my continuing challenge of getting all 5 toes into sock before I pull it up too far. How that seems to be my biggest problem in cold water swimming. So I'm not sure I'd do so well on dexterity. Kate, it's difficult for people to see on the screen your body type, but you're a fairly lean lady.
Yes. I don't fit, I'm not a typical build for a lot of the ice swimmers, or perhaps a lot of the channel swimmers. We're seeing some really fast sort of Olympic standard swimmers coming into ice swimming now, and they are truly fast, like unbelievable times they're able to do, certainly in the last World Championships in Russia and some of the competitions this winter in Europe. So those people will be wearing the competitive suits, the FINA approved ones, be ultra thin, but they may not be going on to do the ice miles. So you're getting that elite swimmer coming into the sport now. But it is an all-inclusive sport. It does suit everybody. I've been helping and mentoring a disabled swimmer, a double amputee, who was hoping to do an ice mile. The water was too warm, unfortunately. So it is for everyone. I do try and include that, and in the club and the personal coaching that I do is to get everybody in the water. It's something everyone can enjoy.
And talk to us about your last of the ice sevens, what it means to you, and what you have to do to plan a trip to a place like Argentina. Just don't go through it quickly, but it's, did you meet somebody in China who's now going to be helping you in Argentina? Go through the steps on it, because for most people they could probably get a plane to Argentina, assuming COVID relaxes its grip at some point. But Argentina is a big place, and the logistics involved in setting something like that can't be easy.
So I've got a couple of options. Potentially 3 options, in fact. So I may go to Ushuaia in Argentina. There's a hotel there which has got a doctor. So one of the key things is having access to water, which, believe it or not, is a problem with the way you can't, just like in England, we can go to any beach, it's pretty public. So it's getting legal accessibility to water that is cold enough. Having a medic there, which is really important. And being able to convince the medic that what you want to do is safe and you're not totally bonkers and they're fine with it. Rory will come with me, and it's important to have somebody with you who knows your stroke rate, who knows your stroke, knows the right time to let you keep swimming, and if you get into danger, can pull you. So it's a lot of contact that you have to build. I've got some very good Argentinian and Chilean ice swimmers. They've both offered to help me. Whether I go to Chile, that's another option, but in the national park, you're forbidden to swim. So it's about getting the right permissions, it's about getting in touch with local people, and also to get the water temperature. I don't want to go up into altitude to swim. I did a reasonably high swim in the Atlas Mountains. It was fine, but I don't want to go to Ski Portillo where Joe and Barbara have done their ice mile. My hats go off to them for doing it. I would rather do one nearer at sea level. So there's a couple of options that I've got in Chile that I'm working on, and also in Ushuaia. The third option is, because I do a lot of work with the armed forces through my day job at the county council, is going to the Falkland Islands. And I've got offer of accommodation there, and I've got some offer of some help from some army personnel, and hopefully the fire service. Again, it's a question of water temperature. So COVID-19 has sort of drawn a halt to the detailed planning. So I've just got to look at what restrictions, when they're lifted, and compare water temperature before I go. But I'd also like to say that I'm really pleased that I've got a sponsor for my last ice mile, which I haven't had before. It's AXA Insurance. So I'm delighted, and that's really made a massive difference to me.
And you talked a little bit about stroke rate, and then you talked earlier about sometimes slowing down halfway in your ice mile. Can you give us some metrics, what stroke rate you're typically starting out at, what you're typically finishing at, and at what number Rory is screaming or pulling you out?
Luckily, he's never had to pull me out, but it was very close. I don't think I could have done much more than I did in China, that's for sure. Normally, my stroke rate is probably 58 to 60. And it may go down to, what do you think, about 50, 50-ish, 52. I usually pick it up again towards the end when I can taste the finish. But I never have a big stroke rate. You're never going to find me with my shoulders going around much more than 60 at the best of times.
And if you stop in the middle of your ice mile and start to do breaststroke, or your stroke rate goes down to 40, what's going to happen?
I wouldn't be allowed to continue at that. If I swallowed water and had to do breaststroke twice, and I could say to them, I've just swallowed it, and I was sounding okay, yes, I perhaps could get away with 2 strokes. But if it's, once my stroke rate drops probably below 48, I'd be, Rory would be saying, are you okay? And you'd listen to that response. And it's like when I am supervising and looking after people doing ice miles, if that person swimming takes a long time to understand and respond to that question, everything's slowing down. That's not a good sign. If they try and answer, if you say what day of the week it is, like, I think it's Tuesday, the cold's got to me. So it's time to get out or be pulled.
For people on the call who might not understand it, hypothermia is often a combination of the mumbles, grumbles, stumbles. So if you ask somebody their middle name and it takes them a minute and a half to tell you, it's probably not a good sign. If somebody can't swim reasonably straight, it's typically not a good sign. And if all they do is grumble, typically by going, it's typically not a good sign. So this ability to understand a question and answer back promptly is probably one of the best signs of hypothermia, along with a stroke rate.
And also, I think your body position with your legs will start to go down, which then slows you down even more.
And my other one is when I turn my head to the side to get air, I only get water. It's usually a bad sign as well. So let's assume COVID relaxes its grip on the world. You get to Argentina or Chile, you become the 3rd Ice 7 swimmer in the world. What then?
There'll be other things to do, other challenges. So hopefully I'll be looking at Poland for the next WOWSA World Championships next January. And then also I'm hoping to complete the Triple Crown of marathon swimming as well this year.
And what's left?
Catalina Channel.
So you've done the English Channel and you've done Manhattan. Well, Catalina stays open later in the year. California seems to be less hit than many other places. So that's interesting. When you go to Poland, is this a personal world champion quest for you, or are you proudly leading a GB team?
I would be leading a GB team. The very first World Championships, I was lucky enough to get an age group gold. There weren't many of us going. There was only Rory and I representing Great Britain. But since then, the sport has really grown. We've attracted a lot more elite swimmers, a bigger range of swimmers. So understandably, as a people, a lot faster in my age group. But I got a silver medal at Murmansk this time for my age group, which I was really pleased about. So if I get on the podium, I'd be absolutely delighted. But just go in there, do my best, and support the team as well.
And growing up, did you, as a young girl, did you watch things like the Olympics and see the GB team walk out behind a flag and think to yourself, wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? Did you ever imagine you'd be doing something like that?
Never in a million years, never.
And describe the feeling, describe the pride that you and others would have in that situation.
It's just amazing. I mean, each country has their own different way of running the World Championships, but to actually go out there carrying the flag, the first time in Russia, there were Russians dressed up in traditional dress. They had homemade traditional bread, and you got given salt and bread, and just the celebrations and the opening ceremonies, the closing ceremonies have been out of this world. And to just the closing ceremony, to just climb that stage with the flags walking across it and everybody applauding you around the town square, it's amazing. It's a very special feeling that, I'll never forget. Having competed in other events in China, when you're surrounded by Chinese drummers and putting on performance for you and seeing that culture, and you meet so many people from around the world and so many friends I've got, and the camaraderie, it's just amazing.
And how many people are in these GB squads in recent years?
I think we took 14 swimmers to Murmansk.
And this upcoming one in Poland, what's your expectation?
I would like to say that we haven't got the numbers, but I would very much hope that we're taking more, because although Great Britain hasn't got the coldest climate, when you look at Eastern Europe, you look at Russia, Canada, we've got one of the largest number of ice milers. So I think, the GB Championships this year, we had 64 swimmers for the 1,000 meters, which is more than we had in the very first World Championships in 2015. So it's a growing sport, and depends how the numbers are decided, but I'd really like to take 15 to 20 swimmers over. Got to persuade RAM to let us to do that. So hopefully we can have that discussion on the global board soon.
And when you look across at all these nationalities participating in the sport, what, which country gives you the craziest? Who are the most sociable? Who are the toughest? Which have the best looking men? Whatever you want to answer.
That's a tough question. I think in terms of teams, I think South Africans, there's not such a big team, but there's some very good swimmers. Sam Welton is really fast and very good. I think the Germans have a very big and very strong team over various age groups. You've got Christoph Wansrush, Bulgaria. You've got up and coming really fast people. You've got Sven in Holland. All sorts of countries that you have, Ireland, America, Russia, of course. So, and no matter the language, you find a way of communicating, of making friends. The swimmers find a way through the language, and it's great, absolutely great.
Well, we've just about reached our half an hour. So first, I want to thank you very much for your time. Any final comments for people?
If people want to get into the ice, I would recommend you start in the summer, swim regularly, and then keep going through the winter. Don't swim alone. Find a group, find a local swimming club or a Facebook group so you can go with friends but wait until after the virus is over, please, and stay safe.
Steve, can you manage to put a video on now, or is this technology
Yes.
beyond you?
We're going to put a video of you swimming in your ice mile in Canada, but I have one question. I had the pleasure of meeting Kate and Rory in Tunisia, and they very much impressed me. They impressed me because they were both individually competitive, obviously passionate, but I was wondering, how do you train together? I mean, are you racing each other? Are you constantly pushing each other? Do you talk about your strategies when you're at home over dinner? How do you work that that relationship on a personal level and the let me just on a competitive level, Kate?
I think we do talk about it. Obviously, Rory is much faster than me. When we train in the club, 99% of the time we're in different lanes. But we do push each other. I think it's fair to say that in the winter I sometimes push him a bit harder to stay in the lake a bit longer. I think he likes the appeal of the sauna a bit earlier than I think he could do with it. But I think, yeah, we both are really passionate about it, and you know, Rory has been really good in supporting me wanting to get my I7. Sometimes he's come with me. For example, when we went to the High Atlas Mountains, and the plan was for Rory and another friend who came with us, Matthew Johnson, they were both going to attempt the ice mile. In the end, I did mine, and they both decided they weren't going to do one. So he's always done that a couple of times, and his ice mile was in Norway, so he picked quite an extreme one to start. I think it was about 2.5 degrees, but I've not persuaded him to do another. We may find he does in South America. We'll have to wait and see. But yes, I think it is about recognising each other's limits. We obviously know each other's swim style, but also knowing what our dreams are and knowing that you have to push.
Thank you very much. Very much enjoyed this conversation. And Ned, we're going to switch over to Bruckner Chase. He's actually in a hot spot over in New Jersey in the United States. Bruckner, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Great.
You and Ned Denison have never met each other before, so just sort of explain to Ned who you are and why you're sitting on a beach with a rainbow behind you.
Well, since everything is a virtual escape at the moment, I figured a beach in Pongo Pongo in American Samoa might be better than New Jersey right now. So if we're social distancing, I figured the other side of the world where no one is would be kind of a good message to convey. And this way I don't have to put on a mask as well. So I'm in Ocean City, New Jersey. And as anyone knows who looks at the numbers, we're kind of part of a tri-state area, New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. And collectively, I think this morning we've got about 265,000 positive cases. And I have been doing ocean stuff and marathon swims for over a decade now, but my background was in endurance sports, originally in triathlons, and then moved into the colder marathons swimming world when I was living in Santa Cruz, California. Ned, I fell in with the wrong crowd with the Dolphin Club and found that while other people were standing on the beach shivering, I was not. And someone said, you really ought to think about doing some of this stuff. And then I was introduced to Michelle Evans Chase, and someone said that, I think her family did a lot of long distance swimming, and her late father was actually Colonel Evans, who did the Farallons in 1967. So Michelle and I falling into swimming together around the world was kind of a family legacy. So we have continued to find ways to get into the ocean and fold communities into what we do, not just being out in the water, but how do we use our experiences to positively impact others? And a big focus of what I do now is, how do we make sure that when people are heading out into the water, they have the knowledge, wisdom, and tools to do that safely, whether they are in American Samoa, where we do a lot of work, or in Australia, or New Jersey, or in Europe. I've been able to travel all over the place, meeting with different communities, talking to different people, and while I'm not doing as much marathon swimming now, really any, although I still train a lot. I mostly take part in surf life-saving sports, which is kind of just a different way of being out in the water. Swimming's a part of it, paddling, surf ski. But what we're facing now, just like everyone else right now, our beaches and boardwalk are closed. We talk about getting out into the water and don't swim alone, yet at the same time, you're supposed to stay alone and stay distance. So how do we marry what we are allowed to do now with what many of us, you know, what we call home and being out on the water? I also work for NOAA and focused on community safety. So we had campaigns that we were launching to protect beachgoers throughout the United States. We have a film series that the US government put out to make sure when people go to the coast, how do they do that safely? We had campaigns that we're rolling out to help protect communities, and now everyone's kind of sheltering in place. So how do we get the word out? How do we message out? Much of what we do through our foundation also is focused on community engagement and events. I also work for Red Bull, and all of that is shut down. Most of us are not even talking about events until after, you know, sometime in May. So how do we keep connecting with people with what we love to do, share that, grow that? So that's kind of where I am now, and that's kind of how I got here.
How is your confidence level for your events running in August?
It is, so we, in this area, one of the key events we have with Red Bull, which is pretty high profile, it works with professional ocean lifeguards from throughout the mid-Atlantic. That date is scheduled for mid-July. And as of right now, we still have that event on the books. The difference is it does only have 200 professional competitors, and it's not a massive, you know, 5,000 person crammed into one transition area. So we have a pretty good feel that that will happen, but we're also working on plans B, C, and D if we need to limit the field, if we need to limit the crowds on the beach. So a lot of what I'm looking at now is how do we prepare to adapt to whatever, not just local and federal administrators may tell us we have to do, but what do health professionals suggest is going to be safer? I know a friend right now has a event called Escape the Cape on the East Coast. It's kind of an East Coast version of Escape from Alcatraz, scheduled for June 10th. And I don't think anyone's going to be comfortable getting onto a ferry with 1,500 of their closest friends on June 7th and hanging around for 3 hours. So how do we give people this outlet that they want and still stay safe and make sure we're not contributing to a health problem, but rather addressing a positive health benefit of what we love being in the water.
You make me smile. My event will start on the 4th of July in Ireland, and my choke point is the hot soup and the group around the big container of hot soup. It's a limited amount of space, and as you say, it's okay when people are in the water. They typically are 2 meters apart. Right. I'm not too worried about that part, but it's a getting in and a getting out and the afters.
Yeah.
So I think early June will be tight. I think my certainly hope is that by July things will have eased up a bit. For your events, how intensive from a safety standpoint is preparation?
Well,
so an example for the Olympics, I'm not worried that somebody's not going to be able to swim 200 meters butterfly. They may not have their best time if their training is interrupted, but when you start talking about a marathon swim or an ice swim, then those preparations become part of an overall safety regime. And if they've missed too much preparation, it starts to impact safety.
Well, and I want to address one thing. You and I both take smaller groups of people out into the water. You in Cork and me in Ocean City. And just real quickly, I shared some of your concerns as well. We put out a newsletter yesterday that we were going to make some operational changes. We're not going to have a post-swim cooler where people are interacting with cups and getting drinks. We're probably not going to have any food available, even gel. And we're going to have people bring their own pens to mark themselves so that we're not touching them as much. And we're not going to have community swim caps. Normally, we have some available if we want to use it and then return it. We're going to go, look, you got to arrive at the beach able to self-sustain, for safety. Now, getting on to your question about safety for larger events, I'm also a professional ocean lifeguard, and I train ocean lifeguards in one of our local beach communities. So one of my concerns too is for the lifeguard professionals. So we have 16, 17, 18, up to 45-year-old seasonal first responders that'll be providing the safety for some of the ocean events. And how do we, lifeguards, in order to do their job, must closely connect with and touch people who may be in trouble. So what does that mean for, they become kind of the frontline first responders when people start heading back to the beaches and stuff. They become almost in the same sort of position that the medical professionals are in now. They're the ones, if someone's in trouble, they're being called on to respond. I think that, you know, looking at what I'm getting a lot of now is triathletes whose pools have been closed for, you know, upwards of 4 weeks now, emailing me on a daily basis. You probably get it as well. When is the water warm enough for me to get in? Where can I go? Because beaches are closed, so they can't go there. So they are seeking out the most isolated places they can find and probably pushing any sort of safety limits I would ever recommend, because they're just chomping at the bit to get in the water. And I have been working with NOAA and the National Weather Service going, look, we really need to now push out how to teach people decision-making processes that will keep them safer when they seek out to go swim alone or go to something that's not a swimming beach that may be off the beaten path, because I'm worried about that impact on first responders that may have to go because they went somewhere dangerous. And then we also work with Orca Wetsuits that is putting together a series because they recognize the value of wild swimming and open water swimming, but that there may be fewer lifeguards that may be available later in the season than they would normally be there. So how do we address the safety of making sure people make good decisions so they don't put themselves in a dangerous situation? And then how do we protect the lifeguards and first responders that may be called on to then assist those people?
Our swimmers are doing everything from swimming in small streams, which are probably less than 2 meters across and certainly a meter deep.
Mm-hmm.
The one that has come up recently is a number of people have gone out and purchased these inflatable pools. They put them up in their backyard with a bungee cord.
Right.
And the really dramatic statement somebody made was to say that, you know, their little sister drowned in one of those pools in the height of a summer 20 years ago. And for the people who are putting up those pools now, the last thing they've been thinking about is their kids
right.
running around in the backyard in these pools, because it's not the summer.
Right, right.
Give me some idea of the life you're leading between New Jersey and American Samoa and California and where else. Do you have a real place to live, or are you kind of 3 suitcases and a knapsack around the world?
Well, I was supposed to be in Australia back in February, March. Also was planning a return trip to American Samoa with the Department of the Interior. All of that stuff is kind of on hold indefinitely. In fact, with the number of cases in the U.S., I don't know optimistically until a lot of things are in place when anyone would welcome someone from the U.S. Like I can't imagine flying over to Australia right now. American Samoa, a very isolated U.S. territory in the South Pacific with very limited healthcare. They have 0 cases right now, and I would hate to be the one that introduced it to them. So I'm lucky in the moment in that my shelter at home is an island in South Jersey where the ocean water temperature right now is flirting around 49 or 50, which is not unlike San Francisco Bay where I've swum in January and February. So for those of us that are experienced ice swimmers or cold swimmers or marathon swimmers, 49, 50 degrees, sorry, I don't know the Celsius conversion, probably what, 4 or 5 degrees is
9 or 10.
Oh, 9 or 10. So that's, that's swimmable.
Yeah.
So my home right now, my suitcases are empty. I even went so far as to put them back in the attic because I don't know when I'm going to use them again. I had just flown back from Texas before all this hit. And that was the last trip I took. My daily life now is reconnecting with trail running, which I consider the trail running is kind of the open water swimming is kind of the trail running of the sea. So it's not too far off. I'm just training a little bit of blue for a little bit of green in, you know, a relatively remote area where I don't see a lot of people. And then because I'm an ocean lifeguard and compete in surf lifesaving, I have prone paddle boards and surf skis. So even when the weather's bad, I've got lagoons and bays on the backside that I can still access. And the activities I do transfer over really well to swimming. And I'm very lucky to have a WOWSA swim erg. And that is, I don't think I had ever envisioned swimming 10 to 15 hours a week on a WOWSA swim erg, but that's the way it goes right now. Because right now we've got 60-kilometer-per-hour winds and 48-degree air temperatures, so no one's going out onto the open water today.
One of the things I'm sure you'll echo into one of the problems we've had in Ireland is when the pool's closed, every warm water swimmer in Ireland asks the question, is it time now to go into either the sea or the lakes or rivers, which are even colder? Right. So we've had a big problem in the last couple of weeks saying to people, all right, this isn't the same, right? Mm-hmm. You guys barely get in the ocean in the summertime. It's now March and April. It's great that you have an old windsurfing wetsuit, but you can't move your arms. And try to convince the people to, you know, make your first swim more of a dip, acclimatize 3 or 4 times, and then keep your distances. You know, the really experienced people are in for less than an hour. You don't go from the pool to the ocean in 49 Fahrenheit, 10 Celsius, and go for a 2-hour swim. It just doesn't happen.
No, and
it's not safe, and it's not sane.
And I don't know, it's interesting because when I used to live in Santa Cruz, California, that's why I was swimming with the Dolphin Club. And I would suggest that the ocean wisdom was, in my mind, a little bit higher in that part of California as far as open water swimming. I moved to New Jersey, and most people are more fair weather swimmers. I mean, they stop going into the ocean when it drops below 12 degrees. And even then they're in a wetsuit. There's not the knowledge base and the peer resource like what you provide to those in Cork. And I think that we have been sharing as much information as we can because people also here, they don't have anyone to ask. So they'll go, oh, I'm out for an hour and I'm not cold right now. And they don't know about warming up afterwards and after drop and how often the danger is often after they get out of the water. So we're trying to at least connect them with, you know, there's really good resources out there now coming from the ice swimming world that tell people how to warm up and how to acclimate. You know, the stuff that you put out through Cork is invaluable. So how do I, you know, tap into and connect people to the resources that are out there for those that I can't reach, but make sure that they've got good information so they can make good decisions, and really stress to them that it isn't just that you'll have a bad workout, you could actually die.
Let's switch the subject for a moment and help inspire people in 6, 12, 18 months to take a trip out to the Pacific Islands. What are the 5, 10, 20, and 30K swims available to the community out there? What do they look like? How big are they? What are the water temperatures?
Well, I think that, and what you're talking about, and I recently shared a post with people that some of the most rewarding adventures we can have don't need to require someone else to put up a starting line, a finish line, and give us a medal. And when I originally got into marathon swimming and even endurance athletics as a whole, for me, it was a joy of seeing what I could do. Being outside, being on the trails, heading up a mountain that I didn't think I ever could have climbed before, much less run. And I think that with the uncertainty of what event goals might be able to look like for the next 6, 12, 18 months, I have been encouraging people to kind of re-tap into what do you really love about it, beyond the finisher's medal and all that, the adventure of challenging yourself to become better, to doing something you didn't think you could do. Don't be afraid. I've talked to a lot of triathletes that were, you know, trying to qualify for Kona or do, you know, go sub 10 hours for an Ironman or sub 16 for an Ironman. Go take that same passion and don't be afraid to finish last in your first 10K swim. Don't be afraid to not have the immediate success that you've gotten used to with triathlon, but try a 5K or a 10K. And I spend a lot of time in Australia. There's a number of swims to swims up and down the Gold Coast and the Sunshine Coast that, you know, both put you into challenging ocean conditions, as well as being longer swims. And I know that with what we're doing, we're trying to create more opportunities. People want to try 5Ks or 10Ks. Can we put together small events that allow 5 to 10 people to kind of experiment with it without the commitment of an event that might seem a little bit scary? Sadly, in American Samoa, one of the things we're working on is developing their infrastructure for hosting open water, you know, adventures, whether it was an actual event or just people being able to go down there and swim in places like that behind me, which is Pongo Pongo Harbor. So we actually had begun building infrastructure, and then everything's kind of, you know, shut down at the moment. But there is a Samoan swim series in Independent Samoa, just 40 minutes away, that is doing some 5K, 10K, and even I think a 12-mile swim between two of the main islands there. But whether, you know, with the uncertainty of travel and when are you going to be onto a plane, and if you're from the US, when is someone going to let you come into their country? Exploring ways to do something new in your own backyard, you know, find that sense of adventure out your front door, because it may not be that longer, further afield options are available for a while. I mean, like I said, I'd not really trail run in a long time, although I had a history in it. So I'm loving just being out in nature again in a way that I'd kind of stepped away from. And I'm like, you know, as you know, if you're out of the water for 6 weeks, there's nothing worse than that feeling of that first couple of workouts in the pool. And I think that kind of embrace that, relearn something that you'd forgotten, or use this as a time to master something you've always put on the back burner because you were so focused on a qualifying time for an event.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts on it. The first thought is, as people pack for events and they go away, I always put a medal in my gear in case for whatever reason they don't have enough to give me one. So you should always have your own medal just in case that's important to you.
I love it. I love it. And a chalk to make your own start and finish line too.
Well, you know, yeah. And then I guess the second thing is we have all this endless talk about how important the mental aspects are of these events. We have all this discussion, and your average person goes down to the swimming pool, has a bit of a chat, does a bit of a session that's written on the board, has a bit of a chat, and goes home, and doesn't really put any time into the mental aspects of it. And I just advise people, you know, just sit down for an hour or two, think about your next event, but don't think about the beautiful scene behind you in Samoa. Think about the fact that it was raining when you started, or it is going to be raining when you start, and a little bit of fog threatens to roll in, and the waves pick up, and you see people getting out of the water. And Steve Munatonis has this great description of the most common shark in the world, which is called the wave shark, which is you look up and you're for sure you saw that fin. But spend this time now to go mentally through your swims. Imagine these difficult conditions. Imagine how you're going to fight through the challenges instead of just going to the pool and doing another hour and everything. Talk to me a little bit about what was supposed to be your next big event, your personal competitions. What did you have on your list?
Well, I had several challenges last year that kind of kept me from training at the level that I wanted. And my last major competition was the Life Saving World Championships in Australia in 2018. And I had a severe traumatic injury to my foot that required a lot of stitches 4 weeks before that. So I was kind of frustrated that I didn't get to perform as well as I would have liked. And then 2019, I got sidetracked by some stuff. And I was looking forward to, there was World Championships in Italy coming up in into the summer this year. I take part in Canada's professional lifeguarding championships, which is just a stone's throw away. I was really looking forward to going back up to Nova Scotia and racing up there. And we had already begun looking at a new documentary film project that was going to be funded by a grant from an agency here in the United States. All grant funding's gotten frozen. The Surf Life Saving World Championships were canceled 3 weeks ago. Canada, even before that, canceled all of their competitions, including nationals. And those events weren't scheduled until August. So literally every competition that I had looked at that I was going to take part in myself was gone. So and that was, most of them were canceled a couple of weeks ago. So I've kind of been processing that. But I had moved away from competition for a while and started to seek out adventures. That's what took me to American Samoa. That's what took me to other areas with NOAA and the National Marine Sanctuary Program to explore different oceans and communities around the world. And so now, ironically, I'm probably training and more and fitter than I was before, because I want to be prepared for whatever adventure might come up before me. If someone says, hey, we're going to go back down to American Samoa, or we want to go to the Pacific Northwest, we want to do that, I want to make sure that I'm fit and ready for it. And I think what you talked about with the mental reflection and planning for this, I have a mindfulness meditation practice that I follow religiously. I spend 30 minutes a day in a guided mindfulness meditation that helps me prepare not just for the emotional trials of what daily life is, but also disappointments before events, during events, and being prepared for whatever might hit me. And fortunately, I've got a wife who has a PhD who studies that, so she makes sure I stay on track and does it right.
And looking into the future, I would say that in the last decade or so, this whole area of open water events and organization has really taken off in a hugely positive way. I look back at some of the famous swimmers from the 1950s, and they may have done 6 big marathons their entire life. Well, they involved taking a boat across the Atlantic. These were major expenditures, major investments. And today, as a marathon swimmer, you can probably get in an airplane and do 10 marathons a year without the kind of time or financial expense that those people had to go through. Do you see some fundamental changes in that whole organizational business practice in the future? You mentioned things like, bring your own pen, but that's presumably more of a temporary thing. Is there going to be a fundamental shift in how all of this has been going on?
I think that the fundamental shift is really going to be driven by travel and where we can go and how logistically challenging that becomes. I mean, that adds a level of complexity to something that was already pretty complex. I mean, we had gotten used to hopping on a plane, and we've got our TSA pre-check and our global pass, so it was pretty easy to bounce around. I mean, I don't know about you, Ned, but I usually was flying over 50,000 miles a year, and I was to and from American Samoa and Australia and Poland, and I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know how feasible that's going to be. So I think that people chasing the Ocean 7 are going to have to probably kind of rethink what that might look like. I was training someone who was scheduled to take on the North Channel. I think his window was early July, and I think he's kind of taking it off the books right now because he hasn't been able to train. He hasn't been able to swim. Yeah, he can swim in 50-degree water, but he can't do a 6-hour training swim in 48 to 50-degree water. And so I think that I think that that's really going to answer your question, I think it's going to be really driven by what travel looks like on the other side of this and when. What I really love, and I think what's missing in so much of the competition-focused side of the U.S., there's a book written by a Commonwealth writer called Dip, I believe. And I love the UK's focus on wild swimming, which really kind of conveys the adventure of just the waters in and around us. And I think that if anything, promoting that to people to really look at the wildness and the adventure in your own backyard, and to fold in that mental training and perspective switch that you were talking about. I know a lot of people that have traveled around the world and have not been to the local trails in their own backyard. And I think that this might be the time in which we learn to value what's closer to home. And then in time, we can fold back in those more distant adventures or bucket list things that we were looking at.
You certainly brought up something that hadn't occurred to me, which was, even when the travel is restored, you know, will these places welcome you?
Right, right. And I really see that unique, maybe for those of us that hold an American passport. I mean, at 275 cases in my tri-state region alone, I mean, there are states right now that don't want me to come down. Like Florida would probably stop me at the state border. They were checking, our own island was, Avalon, just south of us, was checking resident IDs just coming onto a South Jersey island if you were from New York or Philadelphia or Pennsylvania. And so I think that there's going to be a real fear of how do we get some of this, how do we implement operations that's going to protect communities so that those of us that just want to go and experience communities and cultures and oceans aren't making other parts of our shared lived experience worse.
In Ireland, this is a big national holiday, 3 or 4 days, depending on your arrangements. And there's been a 2-kilometer travel restriction put in place for most people, unless you're a nurse or a doctor going to work, kind of thing. But this was the weekend when the government actually implemented roadblocks.
Wow.
And they're stopping cars, hundreds of roadblocks, stopping cars, and they're going, why are you driving and where are you going and what's your excuse? And going to see your elderly grandmother or your mother on an Easter Sunday isn't a good story. The fines are very high, and they're no longer relying on people to be sensible around the beaches and close those, which I'm sure they've done in places like California as well. So,
yeah,
so things have changed.
Yeah, they changed I did hear yesterday, so I'm in close contact with Beach Patrol chiefs as well. And I know we never know what we're going to wake up to each morning. I know that our beaches and boardwalks are closed, but I do know that the ocean is open. They were allowing surfers to cross the beach and go out as long as they also maintain distance in the lineup. Also, you know, like if I go out and paddle, I'm, you know, a quarter mile offshore. And so it's not feasible to enforce it anyway, and nor do I think they really can. And I live on an island, so I can do that within 400 meters, not much less 2K. But it's a matter of, for me, I think, not just following what's there, but also, since we're public figures to some degree and influencers, setting forth the right example for others. That I might have a thought process that I went through in my head, but if I post a photo of something that other people may not make the same considerations I took into play, it's setting a bad precedent. And so I'm very conscious of what we as the experts and the people that can impact others, what we're putting out there and what we're sharing. And then, you know, like the discussion we're having now, this is what goes into all this.
I put that into simple words for some of our more accomplished swimmers. I say, it's not a problem that you can't handle the conditions. The problem is who's following you.
Right, exactly.
And you may have to say on that day when you're quite able to swim, you might have to publicly say, it's a bit too rough today, guys. I'm going to give it a miss.
Right.
Even though if you were alone or you were with your best friend, you'd go in a heartbeat, but you've got 12 people behind you and you've got to worry about the least confident of that group.
Well, and yeah, you're exactly. I mean, like Ned, I mean, you and I, there's stuff that I bet you and I would do on our own that we would not do with a group of 50 swimmers that came down to the beach for one of our sessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've reached the end of our conversation. I wish you well in the recovery of the tri-state area. I hope you're able to get back to adventuring soon. And you look young enough to have a bit of competitive years left in you.
Well, I need to make Cork one of the first places I go to. I mean, it is, and Steve will tell you that I read your stuff and live vicariously because I think you and I share sort of a similar sort of intensity and fear factor in some of the training that we put ourselves through and possibly others. So Cork is definitely on my adventure list.
Well, you're on my invite list when you're ready. So thank you very much again.
Thank you, everyone. Hope to see you again soon.
Thank you very much, everybody. All right. See you next Wednesday. Bye.
Bye.